Now we have a session by Deepender Rana, Executive Managing Director, South Asia, Insights Division, Kantar. On the topic, the consumers have changed, but have brands kept pace?
Hello, everyone. So the topic for today is consumers have changed, but then have the brands kept pace? And with everything that's happened during the pandemic, consumer habits have changed, the world has been turned upside down. The question is, your map to growth still accurate? And the thing to think about is, in the rush to return to normal, we need to use this time to consider which parts of the normal do we want to go back to? What is worth returning to? Let's look at some thoughts related to this. Now, for those of you who are working on FMCG brands, times have been good, especially in-home consumption has grown up a lot. But as things open up, what will happen? Will this be able to sustain, or will out-of-home habits come back and then actually lead to a decline in some of the surge that we have seen in consumption of FMCGs in particular? Now, there's some factors which are in your control and some which are not. So, for example, mobility. We saw actually two unique factors influencing forces of FMCG growth. Whenever the mobility is impaired, the FMCG surges no matter what level it is at. And you see that pattern going right through the data. The second one is the threat of pandemic. So whenever the threat looms large, you see that hand hygiene, for example, becomes imperative. And I've just picked up two examples of things which are outside the marketer's control. Of course, you can react to it smartly, but you also need to figure out what to do in the long term when things are not just about reduction in mobility and the threat of COVID because of lockdowns. And each of these forces brings a different dynamic into play. So if you look at full mobility, no threat, it's status quo, it's normal, right? There's no external force, no category advantage. But then let's say you have full or partial mobility, which might be the case going forward, especially if some of the fears of third wave come through. You will see that personal and home hygiene generally sees a surge. And people also start looking for immunity builders. I'll be talking about that a bit today. And then the third thing is restricted mobility and high threat. So when hygiene holds, categories like snacking, staples see a rise, and grooming and out of home take a hit. Now the question is, when in the new normal, how do you adjust to this new environment? And that's what we'll be talking about. So not only is the external environment changing, consumers are also kind of introspecting and thinking about themselves. And they're searching for purpose within themselves. They're thinking about relationships. They're thinking about well-being. And you see the birth of an individual obsessed with kind of giving life to something new, learning a new language, pursuing extreme fitness, focusing on some hobbies. So really personal development has become very important. Eating healthier has become important. And, people are exercising or reading more, at least saying they want to do that. So this has been a bit of a time of cultivating self-reliance and self-improving. Consumers don't just want to improve from within, they also want a boost, for example. And that's where some of the brands have stepped in with brands positioning themselves as immunity boosters. And you see a whole example of that. In fact, immunity is the fastest growing in the overall health and hygiene space. So if you look at just the immunity sector, which is Chyawanprash, honey, adult wellness, toddler MFDs, immunity tea, that's up 38%. Traditional health is also up, 12%, but then, far surpassed by immunity. And again, external hygiene, of course, this is the year of, hand washes and sanitizers, and they have gone up. Now, the question is, while consumers continue to ride the immunity wave, will this continue? And we've done some forecasting and modeling, and we do predict, for example, through our household panel, that immunity will grow by 18% by the end of the year. Now, in sum, just this one aspect of immunity is here to stay. There may be short-term fluctuations depending on the season and the pandemic, but longer term, this is clearly a tide. And then the question is, how do you want to surf this tide as a brand? Interesting thing is, it's not just in food and beverage. All sorts of brands, whether it's international or Indian brands, are kind of getting on the bandwagon and are talking about immunity boosting. Just like a few years ago, there was a natural craze. Right now, there's an immunity sort of craze going. And to be honest, it's getting stretched a bit where you have, Peter England talking about Aperol infused with goodness of neem and tulsi, and you have like RO kind of having, so all sorts of categories are getting into immunity. We just need to be careful how far the category or the brand can stretch. But in general, this is a trend to stay. So you can see that during a crisis and even post the crisis, it's not just doing things in a same things or in a different way. It's about truly reimagining product and experience to meet new customer needs, emotion, aspirations, dream, right? And let's see what these are. So we did a tracking of, we call COVID barometer, and we really tracked what people have been thinking through the pandemic and beyond that. And three themes have emerged. So one is building trust. Second is reducing anxiety. And the third is providing practical utility. And today we'll be focusing a bit more on trust, because that's what goes to the core of long-term brand equity as well, and something we've seen paying dividends in the long term. So basically, trust and integrity is a powerful platform. We all know that, but here's some sort of data which backs that up. So if you look at BrandZ, Kantar BrandZ top 50 brands in India, last year was a case where brands that have grown in value also grew in trust a lot. So it's cyclical. You grow trust, you grow in value. So clearly, trust as a driver is very important. And then if you're low on trust, you can see the value actually dropped. So there is clearly this sort of trust consolidation happening, right? And what could be happening? What does it mean for new brands, for example? If people are coalescing behind trusted brands, what do new brands do? And how has this influenced the experimentation game? So when we again deep delve into our purchase panels, we basically see that, yes, a high number of households experiment with new brands every year. And that's a great opportunity for marketers to attract new users. But you can see that that's dropping, right? The number of experimenters is clearly dropped in 2020. And that's really happening, especially for, of course, out-of-home categories, but it's even happened for in-home categories. Because what we see is that when consolidation happens, consumers gravitate towards the tried and tested. So if you look at the big brands versus small brands, volume growth was much more for big brands, right? Even bigger the brand, the lesser the experimentation away from it. So, that's a great thing. So big is beautiful in times of pandemic. And for those of you who are big, continue to build penetration, which is a great mantra. But then just coming back to trust, there are three new factors that inspire trust in this current environment. And we'll talk about them a bit. One is identification, caring for consumers. So if you look at Amazon, it did that. And that's why it got a high rating on that. Amul was very transparent about its source of production and its purity, and then just relying on its heritage of sort of just helping India. And that's where the integrity and being open and honest comes in. And then State Bank is obviously the banker for India, and they drove a message of inclusion as well, right? So there's this element of acting responsibly, which is what consumers are wanting you to do. And that's gone up a lot. In the past, the factor of just responsibility used to be, in terms of importance, just 16% in driving a strong brand. That's gone up to 49%. And there are three parts to that. There's obviously being fair to your employees, fair to your purchase chain and your distribution chain, being fair to the society and environment. Today, I'll talk about environment a bit because we've done some really exciting work recently in this space on sustainability. So really, it's about kind of being authentic and crafting a credible purpose that is connected to your brand's history and reputation. Don't just take on what is trendy. Be brave. Don't buckle when things get tough. Be relevant. It's not a blanket strategy. Don't lose sight of consumer sentiments during these times, especially. And finally, be responsible. Walk the walk. embed purpose in everything that brand does. And don't just stop at saying what you want to do. Because what is happening is consumers are actively engaging with sustainability. And these are results from the Kantar Sustainability Foundational study we did this year. You can see that people are prepared to invest time and money in companies that try to do good. They pay a lot of attention to environmental and social issues, right, and truly believe in it. Right? However, in a country like India and across the world, the value action gap is still very real. People want to do the right things, but sometimes they're not able to do that. Right? Intentions are good, but obviously the money sometimes doesn't follow, which is what you guys, as marketers would always be worried about. And these three factors are what we have seen, typically undermining the most well-intentioned initiatives. One is obviously cost. People do prioritize saving money over saving the planet. So how do you do that? How do you come up with a clear benefit beyond sustainable? Second is, it needs to be convenient. Comfort is important. Right? So you need to demonstrate an advantage versus the current. So this closing the value action gap, brands have to give consumers a persuasive reason to buy. Right? And we've seen that sustainability alone is really a compelling enough benefit. So you do need to do more to drive adoption. So innovation sometimes can get over that hump, which can really, communication can be very disruptive in some ways. And then finally, making convenience available and activation on the ground really makes the switch easy. Now, we are here to help as Kantar. And where do you start? Eventually, it's about identifying where to play, develop your purpose, get your communication right, put sustainability at heart of the innovation process. It's clearly going up during the COVID time and will sustain after that. And then finally, we gave you some tips on closing the value action gap, right? And really embed this. I mean, this is not a fad. This is not a trend. So you need to embed it within your employee culture. And then just keep monitoring the impact of that on the business. So some thoughts here on how you can still grow, keep growing, and have a long-term path to grow with a very strong purpose embedded in sustainability post the pandemic. So I hope there's a couple of key lessons that you can take away from today's sharing. One is that sales and brand building can go hand in hand. In fact, if you have a very strong brand purpose, you stick to it. Of course, you need to evolve it in line of COVID. But that can help build long-term brand value and an iconic brand, which everybody would love to have. Who would not love a brand which is crisis-proof? And brands with purpose are crisis-proof. Second thing we learned is sustainability is one of the key routes to do that, which can be long-term post-COVID. We see that as a long-term trend. And there is a value action gap, but there are very smart ways to close that. The third thing we learned is whether you're an established brand or a new brand, there are always opportunities out of crisis. So trusted brands, obviously, and big brands are benefiting, but the upending of consumer behavior, the upending of business models, especially the growth of digital and e-commerce, has also given new brands an opportunity to really come in and disrupt the game and in a way, disrupt the rules of marketing. One of the constants that you need to have in place to gain success is keeping a very, very close finger on the pulse of the consumer. What are they feeling? What are they doing? Right? So just make sure that you keep doing that. Now, whatever you're doing for that, whether you're following survey panels or social media data or surveys indeed, make sure that using them constantly to the benefit of your business and organization. Right? So please reach out to us if you want to make your sustainable journey a success, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rana, for sharing your perspective. Indeed, a very informative session. Let's proceed further. Stay tuned.